So a few days ago, Borderlands 4 was announced, as I'm sure you already know, and it got me thinking, what things do I want to see in the game? But more importantly, what do I not want to see in the game? And so after a few hours of thinking and writing down notes, I've came up with 5 things that I really do not want to see in the upcoming game. Now of course, this is all my opinion, so please do keep that in mind. Also, feel free to comment down what features or just anything you don't want to see in Borderlands 4. And if I get enough comments about the topic, I will make a video including all the things that my viewers don't want to see in the upcoming game. With that said, let's get started with the first one. These days, pretty much every game has a battle pass, and it started in 2013 with Dota 2's International Pass. But we all know that Fortnite is responsible for making this feature popular, to the point that most games have one in them. This is definitely something I do not want to see in Borderlands 4, and let me explain why. So on the surface, a battle pass is a good idea, both for the consumer and for the company making the money. But I strongly believe that battle passes are one of the primary factors as to why so many games have been so bad these past few years. Battle passes are usually quite cheap for the consumer, and the companies selling them make a ton of money from them, which leads me on to the negatives. Because these companies are making so much money off this type of content, why would you make any actual quality content? I get that companies are a business and they need to make money, but the problem with adding a battle pass is that it gives the developers no real incentive to make proper good content, because they are already making enough money off the battle passes. I would much rather Gearbox create more quality content even if I have to pay for it. I don't mind paying for additional content as long as it's good and it isn't overpriced. Another negative as to why Borderlands 4 shouldn't have a battle pass is because most of the time the pass can be completed quite quickly, and once it's done, and there will be no replay value added onto it. Furthermore, these passes can also make active players quit the game, seeing that these passes can become like a chore to complete. People who complete every single one will feel the necessity to complete all of them in the future, and this is how they trap you into continuously buying them. And finally, it will push new players away if they see that the game is on the 7th season or battle pass, as they will feel like it may be too late to start the game, or they just don't like how they have missed out on so many cosmetics. I also do not want to see item shops that sell cosmetics on a weekly or daily rotation, but I will be talking more about cosmetics in a different video, so I'll save this for then. One thing that I do not want to see carried over to Borderlands 4 is the terrible and annoying quest structure that we see in Borderlands 3. What I mean by this is the infamous Talk to Lilith sections of the game. This is such a bad game design choice as it just breaks the pacing of the game and is one of the worst things about replaying Borderlands 3. Thanks to Reddit user P13666 for putting themselves through this and counting how many times you have to speak to Lilith. And for those wondering, we have to speak to Lilith a total of 18 times throughout the base game. What makes this even more frustrating, at least for me, is I would always get ahead of myself and head down to the drop pods to progress the story, and then I would notice that the objective says talk to Lilith, and so I'd then need to go up to the top floor of the ship to talk to her. This definitely needs to be changed for the next game for sure. Like if we had to speak to her or any NPC like 4 or 5 times throughout the game, then that is not too bad, but 18 times is honestly insane. The next thing I do not want to see in Borderlands 4 is the return of OP levels. I didn't know if the majority of the player base like it or dislike it, but there is a Reddit post about them and the poll ended up being basically 50-50. I personally dislike OP levels. I wasn't a big fan of OP8, and then the addition of OP10 in my opinion just made me not like it even more. I understand that these levels are optional, but I do want a way for the game to be harder, just not in the form of OP levels. This may be controversial, but I actually did prefer the Mayhem levels from Borderlands 3. The idea of a harder difficulty in Borderlands is good, but I believe that the way it was executed is the issue. There are a lot of balancing problems that have came with Borderlands 2 OP levels, and I dislike how if you wanted to play on OP10, you would almost always need to make sure your build has a slag weapon or a grog nozzle for healing. The other reason I dislike OP levels is that I don't think they are worth it as there are no rewards tied to it. In my opinion, I think it should have been better if you can get a certain rarity of loot or skins that can only be awarded when you get to certain OP levels. I don't know, maybe it's just a skill issue, which it probably is, and if you are watching and you love OP levels, then I completely understand. I will be talking more about how I would want to see harder content implemented into Borderlands 4 in a future video, so keep an eye out for that. So for the story of Borderlands 4, there are 2 things that I personally do not want to see in it. Firstly, I do not want to see Handsome Jack at all. At the end of the reveal trailer for Borderlands 4, there is a face that seems to have a vault symbol in the same position as to how Jack had it on his. This led many people to believe that Jack was going to make a return, but Randy Pitchford has confirmed that the man in the picture is not Handsome Jack. Now, unless I've missed some news or whatever, just because the face is not Handsome Jack doesn't necessarily mean that Jack won't be in the game. I don't mind if Jack's name is mentioned once or twice, but I do not want him making a comeback physically at all. all. I would much rather have a new villain that is captivating and is written well. The villain needs to be memorable and, more importantly, needs to have believable motivations that are consistent to their character. The Calypso twins are a good example of a bad villain. Everything about them are weak. The backstory, their motivations, and it feels like they are just doing things for the sake of doing it. The villain needs to have a credible backstory that could be relatable, but more importantly, their backstory needs to be done in a way that is not forced and feels natural. This is because a good backstory will make the villain's motivations and character feel more captivating. I know the story is not the main focus for a lot of Borderlands players. However, having a good story and villain will do nothing but help the franchise. The second thing I do not want to see in the story for Borderlands 4 is the introduction of a multiverse. I have seen some theories about how Lilith has teared open an entrance into another universe, where Handsome Jack succeeded, but I really hope that this is not the case. Personally, I've never really been a fan of the whole multiverse thing, as it does more negatives than positives in terms of telling a good story. Firstly, a multiverse can become confusing, especially for a new player, but most of the time multiverses are written badly, but there are some good examples of it being done well. The other theory that I have been seeing is that Lilith crashed Elpis into a planet that was cloaked by the Iridians to hide the 7th siren that we heard so much about in Borderlands 3. Now this is what I would prefer, as it would expand the lore of the series in terms of the Iridians and the sirens, but it may also fit with the war that the Watcher warned the Vault Hunters about in the ending of the pre-sequel. The final thing that I do not want to see in the next entry for the series is Borderlands 4 being on a live service model. I don't think that this is likely, but there have been some rumours circulating for some time now, and with the surge of a large amount of games being live service, there is definitely a possibility that Borderlands 4 could be live service. But again, I do think the chance is still low. For those who don't know, a live service game is usually a free game that gets frequent updates that are free, but there are some games that you still need to pay for. The way the companies make money is from things such as cosmetics and battle passes. These type of games are a hit or miss when it comes to being successful, and sometimes they can fail literally in the first couple of weeks because they require a decent sized player base in order to be profitable. The main two downsides to a live service model, in my opinion, is that firstly, because the updates are free, the content you can expect to get most of the time is short and low quality, which is something we obviously don't want. Now I could be wrong on this, so please correct me in the comments if I am, but in order to play a live service game, you need to have an internet connection even when playing single player. That in of itself is a bad thing, but this also means that if the game completely fails and is not profitable anymore, then the company may shut down the servers for good, meaning we won't even be able to play the single player anymore. But again, I could be wrong on that last point. Anyway, there are 5 things that I do not want to see. Please leave your thoughts in the comments on what you want and don't want to see in the new game. I hope you have a good day and thank you for watching.